Hello my friends, although it may not look like it, today I'm going to be doing my most ambitious tutorial yet. Um, I imagine it'll last somewhere between half an hour and an hour. I may split it into multiple parts depending on the way it goes. It has a natural break point. Um, what I have here is a model that I've designed in 3D Studio Max. It's a horse stall. And what I'm going to do is go through a number of the things that are required when taking a model from a 3D program such as 3D Studio, Maya, Cinema 4D, or of course Blender, which is the great free program, and then bringing it into Poser and then using that model in Poser and rigging it if necessary for articulation. Now, when I say rig, there's two things that are meant by rigging. One is adding bones and deciding the way the flesh works, which is not what I'm going to be doing today. And then there's going to be rigging things that are just going to be movable. So these doors open, these panels come off, that sort of thing. And that still is a process, but this is going to be aimed at somebody who's just gone beyond simply posing and adding materials to their models, and they're starting to be ready to make some custom content for their own scenes that you can't buy anywhere. And as you'll see, these are all iron bars, except for these two panels here, which would be wood or plastic in the real world, and a horse would stand in here. And this is what's known as hard surface modeling. The actual modeling is quite simple, but I just want to point out a few things before we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this model from 3D Studio Max. I'm going to talk about a couple of things there, and then I'm going to rig it in Poser. But there are two ways of exporting. I'm going to do the worst way today because it's going to give me an opportunity to explain a number of factors. But before I get onto that, there are a whole bunch of things, considerations that you need to think about. So all of this stuff here will all be textured when you take it in Poser. It will have shaders on. And the simple way to do it is to give every piece of metal a single stainless steel or iron texture or material. And then you don't have to worry about UV mapping or any of that stuff. But that also greatly limits the flexibility of what you can do with your models in Poser. So what I've done here, every single part of this, right, so I've got a group here. I'm just going to open that group recursively and I'm going to grab one of these bars. And you'll see over here, this is the modifier stack that shows what's going on with this bar. And I've added a UVW map. And that's basically a mapping method that enables me to add shaders to this using a coordinate system, so I could add a rust shader or iron or steel, or I could have logos on there or whatever. So that is the preferred way of going. And you'll also notice here that I had this whole frame assembly, not the panels down here, not the doors or anything, but this frame was grouped. And it is much better to group your model before exporting. So here, for example, we have the front gate. And what I would do here is I would group all of the parts of the front gate that remain stationary in relation to each other. So I'd have the hinges, I'd have this bottom bolt here, or this top kind of lock plate here, this crossbar, this all here. I would put that all into a single group. And then down here we've got a locking bolt, so I'd have the head of the bolt and the stem of the bolt. I'd create a group for those two, and I'd go through my whole model creating groups. And then when I come to export from Poser, from 3D Studio Max, I'm sorry, what I would do is I would export the groups individually. So here, for example, I'd select the frame, then I'd go up to here, I'd do export selected, and it would only export that single group. So here I'd have maybe 6 or 7 groups. I'd have the frame, I'd have the front gate, the back gate, the lock pin. Actually, this frame should include these hinge housings as well, and then I'd have the two side panels. And what I'm thinking about here is something that a lot of creators don't think about, and it really annoys me, is they don't think about how you might want to use a model. So I don't know if you've ever seen it, but perhaps you've had a house model where you couldn't remove the walls. So you had to put the camera inside the scene and then use a really low millimeter lens, almost like a fisheye lens, to be able to get inside the walls. And it gives you horrible distortion because the walls are not hideable. And by doing all of these separate parts, these are all parts that could be hidden. So supposing I had Farmer Joe over here, I might want to hide this panel so that I can see the animal that's inside, but I've left the back panel. Okay, so there's lots of things like that that I might want to be doing. So the more groups that you have, the better. Something else while I'm over here, this is the content of my scene. And as much as possible, I've named every single component intelligently. Now, some of them, cylinders, not going to be particularly useful, but screw plates and stuff like that, that kind of gives me some hints. If I wanted to be really diligent, I'd go through every single part and name every single part with a meaningful name. Also, this is super important. I drag materials onto these different elements. They're just single color materials because I'm not interested in putting materials on. I'm not interested in rendering in 3D Studio Max, but my materials are just a placeholder. Now, I've done lots of mistakes on this because I'm going to show you what happens if you do that. So what I do, I've got here is I've got three materials and I've given them useful names: galvanized iron, wood, iron, and so on. And then I've applied them to elements of my scene. Okay, so I said I'm going to do this the wrong way, and I'm going to show you what I mean now. So rather than exporting groups of individual of collected useful parts that are going to work together, so the gate, the panels, whatever, I'm going to export the entire thing because I'm going to be able to show you something else useful in 3D Studio Max. So I go export, export selected. Now this is the first important decision you're going to have to make, is the export format. I'm just going to use OBJ. I've already done it once, but I'm just going to overwrite that. So I'll do horse stall. Says it already exists. Now here's the really important part. If you're fortunate, your 3D program will have an export preset, and what the preset does is it decides how that model will be exported. The most important thing it will do is the scale. So if you built your model to scale in your 3D program, which is a good idea, then this will scale it to poser scale. So as you can see here, poser scale is 0.04% smaller than this, which is, you know, tiny. But it also prefers to have faces as quads rather than triangles. That's to do with the polygons as well. So convert everything into quads, and also it's just exporting the materials and the coordinates. So if you can't do poser, hopefully you can do DAZ Studio, and if you can't do that, then just don't do a preset at all. Switch everything off and then just manually set this to quads and the scale to 0.04, and then that will work in both Poser and DAZ Studio. So I'm going to export that. And depending on the complexity of the model, you may want to leave your 3D modeler open because you may be back and forwards tweaking the model a lot more. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Poser and I'm going to go import, and I'm going to choose wavefront OBJ, so that's an object format, and I'm going to leave this scale to 100%. Now because I've exported the model as a complete model, this option here, place on floor, doesn't matter. I'm going to select that and it's going to put the model on the floor. However, had I done the preferred workflow where I exported as individual groups, definitely don't turn this on because it puts everything on the floor. And if I leave this off, everything imports at the same relative position as it was in my 3D Studio scene. So here, so for example, the gate will stay here relative to this, the panel will stay relative to the frame, and so on. And that saves me having to manually guess where everything is in the scene. In this particular case, that doesn't matter. So I'm just going to do place on floor because it's easier and centered. It brings it into the center of the screen. Otherwise, turn these two off if you're exporting as groups. Just everything else, it doesn't really matter. The scale, you may have to adjust later on. So I'm going to do OK, and now I'm going to choose the actual OBJ that I'm going to bring in. So here's the object now. This I know is roughly the right scale for the scene. But what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to load a horse into the scene so we've got a reference just to be certain. Now, that looks pretty good straight away. You know, it's in the right place, but everything has a single material and none of the parts are movable. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that horse. That horse doesn't matter. That's only brought in just to demonstrate the principle. Okay, so here's where you're going to see that it would have been far, far better if I brought these in as groups. And you're also going to appreciate the benefit of having created those materials. So what I'm going to do now, first of all, I'll just show you the material room for this object. And you'll see that there are a bunch of materials. There's the named ones here, galvanized iron, iron, and wood here. So anything that's iron in this scene, let's just put some materials on there now. So I'm just going to go to the material room off screen. I'm just going to add some materials here. So I'm going to double click to put a steel shader on, and then I get to choose what that's going to go on to. So let's just say iron. I could choose an iron material, but steel's going to be fine for this. Okay, so I think that's probably just bolts. Now I'm just going to choose a contrasting color material here now. So I'm going to choose blue gunmetal. I don't know what part of the scene this is going to go on. Right, so that's the frame. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the wood. I could break this down into a lot more parts. Now, had I not named my materials before exporting, in the material room, these materials would be called wire, one, wire, and then some weird numbers afterwards. So by taking the extra bit of trouble to name them, I've made things a lot easier for myself. And it's better to apply your materials now before we go on to the next stage. So the last one I'm going to do is the wood material. So I'm just going to find a wood material, and I'm just going to do rhododendron wood. It's a material I created in Substance. So there we go. So we have a wood, we have some sort of iron, and we have a different iron for the bolts, I guess. But as we see, if we go into here, it's a prop. The prop is a single prop. I can't do anything with that except put something inside it. So that's not very useful. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over to the grouping tool, and I'm going to do spawn props, and just click that. And if I go up to here now in props, you'll suddenly see that this has been broken down into all of the elements that I had in 3D Studio Max, including the sub-elements of these groupings. Unfortunately, it doesn't remember the groupings that I created in Max, so it just breaks everything down like that. So now what we need to do, we have two processes to do. The first is to create the groupings, and the second is to create the articulations. So I don't want to change the position of anything relative to each other, but I do need to work out what the names of all the parts are. Now, as much as possible, when I gave things names, those names are going to help me with this, but this is still going to be a tedious process. So what I've done here is I've opened the hierarchy window, and what I'm looking to do is to create a hierarchy of things which are children. Well, I'm just going to hide that. That's the original horse stall. I want to create hierarchies of things which are the children of other things. So this is going to be really time consuming. Now I'll just do one, and then we can work out from there. I'll do everything else afterwards so that you can see. So I'll do it off camera. So what I'm going to group here, I'm going to group this bar here. So by clicking on it, I can see here that's called backgate crossbar. and then I can right click here to get what's under there, backgate frame. So I know the crossbar and the frame need to be connected. So hopefully they're next to each other. Yes, so I'm going to put the crossbar of a child of the frame. And I want this also to be connected. So this is lock BT tube, and I'm also going to make that a child of the frame. And it's easier to see what I've just selected now because there's this little divot here that says that it's got children. So it's easier to see now where I need to be making children. And for this section, you might find it easier to do hidden line rather than trying to select things in that material view. And I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to add these hinges to the gate as well. So I need to know what they're called. So that's called tube 4, tube 5, tube 6, tube 7. Okay, some of these I see are actually happening off the screen there. Okay, so it's difficult because you need to see what's happening. I've got a really wide monitor, so there's a load of stuff down here that you can't see and a load of stuff way over here, and I would usually be using that extra screen real estate, but in this occasion I need you to see the hierarchy, but I also need to be able to see the screen. Okay, so we've got this gate, and hopefully the gate, I can just give that a test. If I just grab this parent object of the gate here, hopefully when I move it, all of the elements should move together that I've just grouped. So I'll just move it in Z. Okay, is there anything else that should have gone with that? No, I think that's right. So I'm just going to press Control Z to return it to its 0 position. Okay, so now I'm going to go through. So I'm not going to make you wait while I do this. I'm going to do everything else. I'm going to do everything else in super speed mode. Okay. Okay, guys. Tone of my voice might be a bit different. I had dinner in between. I realised something really weird, which is that this thing here, frame, is the entire group of frame, which I had grouped in 3D Studio Max, but I went back and tried creating groupings of all the other stuff and then exported, and the groups didn't remain, so something strange going on there. But anyway, it doesn't matter. This is convenient. So what I've realised is that now I've created these gate groups, everything else is a child of the frame group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select every single thing here and just drag it on top of this frame group, except pin. You'll see why in a second. So let me see. In fact, I can, oops. So I'm just holding down Shift, and I'm going to drag everything onto this group here, frame. So that simplified my view a lot more. And then I'm going to open it and take out things that I don't need to be in there. So let's zoom in. And oh, it's a real pain not having 3D Studio shortcuts. I want to take this locking pin out. Where is the locking pin? Oh, it's on the other side. So, oh no, it's not. It's here. I think there's a locking pin under there. Yeah, pin. And oh, that's already out. Now I need to go around and do the same on the other side. It's under there somewhere. Right click, pin. Oh, it says it's the same pin. Okay, that's weird. Okay, so let's look for an object called pin in here. Hinge pin, perhaps. Let's have a look. Nope, can't tell. Okay, it doesn't matter for now. It's one of these, I think. Right, not to worry. So I'll be able to show you the principle here anyway. So I've now got a very few groups. I have a group called frame. I have a group called pin. Individual thing called pin. Oh, also, I want these side panels to be removable, don't I? So right click, panel right. That's going to be in there somewhere. Oh, front gate frames locked in there as well. Let's draw that out. make that a child of universe. All of these cylinders and n-gons are the bolts on the side of the panel here. All of these. Rather than making actual bolts, I did an n-gon, a hexagonal n-gon, and then a cylinder inside just to simulate the bolts. You could even do that with a displacement map or just with an image map, but I wanted it to look realistic. So what else is there? I need to take that side panel out as well, drag that, make it a child of universe, which means it doesn't have a parent at all. So we've got panel. Okay, there's another panel still to drag out somewhere. Front gate frame. So this should be, yep, there's the front gate. Crossbar hopefully there, yep, okay, so all children here. Back gate frame, yep, that works as expected. So I just, oops, I made the whole thing invisible. I just need to find the other panel. Oh, there we go. Make that a child of the universe as well. So apart from one little pin in there, which I can't find, I'll find in a minute, we now have separate groups for the frame, the panel, and the two gates. So here's the problem. When you create something like this, let's just take, what's this gate? These panels in relation to this frame don't move. They either become visible or invisible. That's fair enough, okay? And the user can easily do that just by simply selecting the panels. Where's a panel? And then going into properties and doing visibility. There's no easier way of doing that, I don't think. I guess possibly you could make a map pose or something, but it's so easy, there's no point doing it. Right, but here's the interesting thing. The gates, let me see, which is the main gate. So I've selected one of the gates. I don't know if it's back or front here. And I'm just going to move it to see which is which. Okay, that's the other one. So I want front gate frame. And you'll see all the elements are together. But if I want to rotate this now, so the hinge is on the side here. If I do rotate, it rotates from the center, and depending on how the object was created or the group, that rotation pivot point could be anywhere, could even be off the screen, off in the middle of nowhere. So what we need to do is we need to set the pivot point on these hinges here. So I've already done the first part. See these origins, and normally when you're working you can't see that option. Oops, a daisy, I don't know what I just did there. Oops, no, don't want that. Normally this is what you'd see, just the normal scale, X, Y, and Z, rotate and translation. But what I need to do is to see the pivot point, which is the origin. So I'm going to do show hidden parameters, but then I'm going to go into properties and I'm going to do display origin. Origin, pivot point, same name, a different name, same thing. So now I want to switch from hidden line to wireframe so I can see through my model. And here's one of the sucky things about Poser. Now I need to turn the ground off so that I can see through my model. So I'm going to do T for top. If you haven't set up your shortcut keys, then you need to do it. Watch my video on how to do that. Okay, and where's the bit I'm working on? So that pivot point is the origin point is way back there for some reason. Let me just check that I'm actually on the right thing. So what was I working on? Front gate. Let me just have a look. Z. Okay, so I'm behind it now. Okay, let me turn. Let me do the back gate then instead. So I've displayed the origin point of my back gate, but here's the pivot point. You see where this pin is over here? That's where I actually want it to rotate from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this origin and nothing's going to happen. Okay, why is nothing going to happen? Okay, that's weird. Oops, a daisy. There we go. So the origin's going to move. Now, what you will almost certainly find if you're trying to align to a small object such as this one is the origin sensitivity will not be fine enough. See here, look, if I go click, clicks too rough. So what I do is I double click on origin, or I could click on here and open parameters, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to do force limits and I'm going to do sensitivity, and I'm going to move that down to 0.0001. And what that means now is that when I move this origin, I can move it much finer. And then I'm going to do the same with the Z. This time I can use this to open instead. It doesn't matter how I do it. And I'm going to change that sensitivity down to 0.301. And now I'm going to move the Z origin down until it's exactly in the center of the thing that I want to rotate. And now if I go back to my main view, which for some reason is rotated around, but anyway. So if I go to my main view now, if I now do Y rotate, that gate now rotates beautifully around the origin. Now, there's a couple of extra things that I need to do here. If I go Z so that I'm reset, obviously I don't want that gate to be able to pass through here. So if you look at the Y rotation here, that's at 0 when it's completely shut. And if I'll go to the top view, it's easier. If I open it in Y, how far can we open it before it right? So there, now it's starting to hit the frame, and that is 124. So 0 is the smallest it should get, and 124 is the largest it should get. So I'm going to double click to open the parameters again, and the force limits is on in the Y rotation. So we said 0 is the minimum, 124 is the maximum. This is in degrees. And then I'm going to enter that, and now look at this. If I now take this, I can't go any further than those, so that's really useful. And I can change that from Y rotate to open close. So now we've got a nice meaningful tag here for this gate. And what I can also do, I can go into these others. I don't want people changing their position in other axes, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this invisible if I can, and I'm going to click hidden, and I'm going to do the same with okay, I thought I said hidden. Okay, what happened there? Hidden, yes. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Right. Do you know why that didn't hide? Because I'm an idiot and I have show hidden parameters on. But if I turn that off, now the Z rotate disappears, and I can do the same with the X rotate here. Double click, turn hidden on, and you can do that with all the parameters that you don't want people to see. So if I was selling this as a product, I would turn everything else off here, especially origin and all of this. So the only option they'd get would be open and close. And now that it's just idiot proof, it just makes it nice and friendly for them. So now when they select this gate, they have an option there, which is just to rotate front gate frame and rotate or open close, and that opens and closes but within the limits of the thing. And there is a benefit to having stuff as a big group rather than creating a hierarchy with millions of items here, because there's a danger that they're going to select the other elements of this gate. As I said before, if you export things grouped in 3D Studio Max, or your program of choice, they come into here as a single object. And then so long as you don't when you do import, So long as you don't have centered and place on floor, they'll come into the scene in the exact correct relative place. So it's relatively easy to set up your scene. Then all you have to do is set up that origin, set up the rotation and the limits, and you don't have to worry about people accidentally selecting all the other parts of the model. What else could we be doing on this? Oh yeah, there was another part, wasn't there? There was, oops, Daisy, what have I done there? There was also the pins. So the pins are in here. And there's the pin. So in this case, I want to restrict it so it can only go up and down. Now, I could have this. Oh, actually, the head of the pin is not moving with the pin, so I need to find the head object. So what's the head called? The head's called head, and that's obviously going to be a child of frame somewhere. There we go. Let's drag that out of there. Make that a child of universe. So I dragged it out of the frame, and it's now a child of the universe. Now I'm going to make pin a child of head. So that's a single object, but obviously if I'd exported that as a group, that would just be a single object called pin, and the head would be part of it. I could have modeled this just by using extrusion, by the way, where I modeled to here, then I inset a smaller ring and extrude it out so it was only ever a single object. But to be honest, sometimes quick and dirty is fine, you know. This is less elegant, but it works just fine. So I now have the head, and the pin is a child of the head. So now if I grab that and move that in Y, you'll see, oh, I'm pointing at the screen, this pin here will move with it. Let me just show you here. Oh, that's hard to see. I might have given that a different material here. There. Oops, that's not pin, that's something different. That's locking tube. See, the problem with having millions of different objects, how it would have been much more useful to the user. Here's pin. Actually, let me just give that a different material. So we'll give that some lighter contrasting material. I'm just going to do that off screen because it's not something you need to see. Right, so material, standalone, architectural, metals, aluminium. And hopefully that will be a bit easier to see. Yep, there you go. Okay, so here's my pin now. I actually need to change the material on the pin as well, so let's do that. So let's also go to there and give that aluminium instead of galvanized iron. There you go. So the pin's nice and easy to see now. I'm just going to so we know that the pin is a child of the head. So what we need to do is set the restrictions on the head, so much as we just did before. I'm just going to select that head, and you can see here that this is moved into Y by 0.129, so I'm just going to reset that, and we know that that's going to be the minimum bound of the Y, because otherwise it would start passing through this tube here. So all I'm going to do is double click on the Y trans, and we know that the minimum limit is 0 and the maximum limit could be whatever you want. Now you could leave it for the users to just move this anywhere they want, but that's not really very friendly. So we don't care how high it goes because it's coming all the way out, but we don't want it to go down through the body like that. So why is it passing through the body at the moment? Because I didn't force limits. And then I'll hide all the other movements as well. Another thing that I could do is have this as a separately loadable object and have it as a child of the gate or of the frame, and then save it as a child, as a prop, and it would automatically load into the position that you saved it from. So anyway, guys, look, it's just a little idea on how to rig a simple hard body object and how to give people options for making various parts invisible or moving them around or whatever. I hope you found that useful, and I will speak to you again soon.